Welcome back to the Growth Hacking Culture Podcast, the podcast that gets real about the modern workplace. Today, we are tackling a word that is both everywhere and nowhere at the same time: happiness. Some companies are spending millions on it, creating chief happiness officer, uh, collecting mountains of data. But for all these efforts, are we actually getting any happier at work? Some data suggests that we are facing a crisis. Some reports indicate that only 23% of the global workforce feels engaged. The rest are either just going through the motions or are actively disengaged. A state that cost the global economy an estimated 8.9 trillions in lost productivity. So if you get hooked with all these Trump numbers, 8.9 trillions is even more of what Trump is capable of touching. That's not just a line on a spreadsheet, it's a colossal human and economic problem. So, where is the disconnect? The challenge, it seems, lies in what we even mean by happiness. Neuroscience gives us a critical clue. Our brains are wired for two very different experiences: pleasure and happiness. This is where it gets super complicated. Are our corporate happiness initiatives just chasing temporary dopamine spikes, leaving the deeper, more complex needs of the human brain unmet? Is our focus on perks confusing excitement with genuine fulfillment? Here to help us untangle this complex web is a man who has dedicated his life to measuring what truly matters. Matt Phelan is the co-founder and CEO of the Happiness Index, a platform that helps organizations move beyond surface level perks to understand the real drivers of employee engagement and well-being. He's also the author of Freedom to be Happy and the Happiness Index. With a background in data and a mission to decode our emotional culture, Matt brings an evidence-based, neuroinformative perspective to one of the most vital conversations in business today. He's here to challenge our assumptions and cut through the crap. Matt, a huge welcome to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I think just that intro, I'm excited. Like you bring the energy, and I'm looking forward to getting. As you said, these are complex things, but they, at their heart, they are the fundamental human questions, and I can't wait to get into it with you today.
Matt, but the thing is that you're right. It is so fundamental, but does anybody have the time to think about it? It's almost like we are going to work, we are spending time with our families, we are thinking about the holidays that we're going to take in July, August, we are going to think about this beautiful beach that on the sand and all the stuff. And all this, do we really think about happiness even when we have the time in this sandy beach in France, in the south of France? We do we really even take the time to think about what it means for us? Are we enjoying, or are we already thinking about the next thing, the next milestone for our career, for our marriages, for whatever?
Well, I'm a rare person because that's all I think about every single day. And I think an interesting thing here, Ivan, when me and you first met, was at a HR conference in Istanbul. And we met as the speakers over dinner, but we had not met before. But within 5 minutes of us meeting, we were sharing, and you were sharing deeply personal information with me about your unhappiness in your life that you had experienced in the past. So it is, you're a very open person, and this is a subject I'm comfortable discussing, but you're right. Most people wouldn't have had that chat that me and you had looking over Istanbul, but people are thinking it every single day. They're going to work, they're on the train, they're in the car, and they're questioning, is this it? Is this right? Should I put up with this boss? Why am I feeling burnt out? They're thinking it, whether they're talking about it. Every single person is thinking about it and experiencing it right now.
And that's often the problem, that it doesn't go beyond intentions. So we know that we want to change something, that our lifestyle is not what we thought about when we were younger and we had dreams and we were innocent and all the stuff, and now realities should, and we have to think about financials. And then the trick with financial is that is it plays a role in our brains that it's almost like we believe that the impact of our finance is more powerful than anything else.
Yeah.
So then we disregard all the actions because
Yeah.
we are simply afraid.
Yeah.
I've been there, man, and you know that, and that's why I'm really open to talk about it.
Yeah.
In fact, let me open the parentheses. I I do have weird conversations because I'm socially awkward. So if I want to meet someone, whatever is in my brain, I have to let it go. Otherwise, I cannot have like the typical formal conversation with someone.
Same.
But I knew already that about you, about the books that you have written, and about your missions. So that's why I felt comfortable. And it was a topic that was, it is always have been the struggle. For a long time, it was at the level of intentions. And maybe 7 years ago, I decided that, okay, enough with intentions.
Yeah. But if you think about one of the core points here, one of the top drivers of happiness globally and at work is relationships and connection. Now, in our conversation, how many people, they go to conferences, they go to networking events, they go to dinners. Because of the conversation we had, I will remember you for the rest of my life and will be connected in some shape or form. And if we ever bump into each other, whether we decide to meet or whether we bump into each other because we're on the like circuit, like the in my mind, we formed a deep connection over the conversation we had. So your story that you shared with me, although it was very personal, I will never forget it. And we went into some quite detailed conversations. But if you hadn't, as an example, it's quite easy in the amount of business meetings that people have for you not to even remember someone that you've sat next to. How many people have done that? They've been to 100 events in their lifetime and they might not even remember 2 people. So our relationship, and then it is an example of what we talk about, which is, we call them fair weather relationships, where, you know, when 2 people meet and they're falling in love and they only ever talk about like the good stuff in their lives, all the good things. And then the first thing that happens, first time something bad happens, or someone that has a bit struggle, the relationship breaks up because they've never actually shared anything that isn't surface level. They've never actually tested out, you know what, if I tell this person I've had a really bad day, are they going to be able to handle that? Blah, 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 blah. So I think the center of what we're about to talk around happiness is ultimately about connection, but people can't connect unless they actually be themselves. If they just, going back to your original point, if the conversation just stays surface, the relationship will be surface, and therefore a wind can blow it over. But I will remember your story and connect with it forever.
So connection is one element of that makes part of happiness, because it's very difficult to define, by the way, because we define how we feel at a given moment, but we cannot really touch base on things that are, in terms of intensity, a little bit small pikes, but we cannot define that because we never take the time to say, how do I feel now?
Exactly.
That's a big problem. And also in connection, there is always this, again, we have mentioned the fear of the financial fear that people have, but also there is this fear of being rejected. Like you say something deep and then suddenly somebody it will answer in a way that doesn't care. And it is difficult. And it's not more about quantity of people that you can reach. It's more about if the 1 or 2 times that you try to be yourself, because you don't give a damn at that moment about what is going to happen, that is going to be accepted, received. That there needs to be a 2-way interaction.
Yes, but it's practice, isn't it? There's one that is practice, is doing it more regularly. And we should come back to the what is happiness and definition. Let's come back to that shortly. But there's another point here that I think is really important, that when you really share who you are, it means you can connect with the people that you want to connect with. Because if you really deeply share your actual true personality and someone judges you for that or doesn't want to spend time with you, blah, 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 that's the best time-saving device that you'll ever have in your life. Because if you pretend to be someone else and then it takes them 2 years to figure out who you are and then they don't like you, you've wasted 2 years. And this is what I always say to my friends coming out of work for a minute when it comes to job interviews, and they say, "Oh, I can't say this or I can't say that." I always this is a male privilege point. There are many women that do not declare that they have children because they don't want to be deemed as mums. I've heard mums say this to me, like they hide away that they're a mum. If someone tells me that they're a mum, it's the most fascinating thing that I can ever imagine. Like, I can't imagine what it must be like to build a human being in your body. I just cannot comprehend how amazing that entire thing is. That we talk about inventing stuff. A woman can make another human. Like, it's unbelievable, right? But when it comes to an interview, yes, you can say all the right things to get the job. But if you say all the right things to get the job, you can end up in the wrong job. And then you're in that spiral where you could be in a job for 5 years. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, which I've taken out of business and started to apply it to life. And your story around Dubai to Switzerland and what you told me about how you feel about where you live and how being in the more near the forest. I've been thinking about something recently that you said around, in business, we always talk about opportunity cost. So the opportunity of you pick strategy A, it's fine, but you miss out on strategy B. What about that in life? What about the opportunity cost of staying in that relationship that is toxic, or spending, or still hang around with the same friends that make you feel horrible every time you do? Like, we need to apply opportunity cost to life as well. It's a great business phrase, but opportunity cost, it's also the decisions that we make to do with our private life that are incredible. When you moved from Dubai to Switzerland, there was probably a big decision there, but there's an opportunity cost of assessment as well. So we're slightly going off tangent, and I do want to come back to definition of happiness, but
you're right. But this opportunity cost, when we are talking about ourselves, is very subjective. And on top, there is, again, fear. Like, would I tell somebody that I have a child if I know or I have this limiting belief that this is it, there is not so many opportunities in the market. If I don't take it, despite that it may not be perfect, or men or women who decide to be with each other just because, oh, I'm going to be alone. Fear again. So it seems that fear, oh my God, now I'm going to talk about fear instead of happiness. Fear is the ether that is around us, always clouding any judgment, and might be the thing that prevents us from being happy, because we cannot be objective about the opportunity cost, as you say.
So you can't be happy without psychological safety. So if you're not feeling safe, you feel fear. Fear in itself is actually an evolved emotion that's actually incredibly important for the survival of human species. Fear is not a bad thing. It allows you to run away from the bear. It allows you to not walk down that road that your body is telling you, you know what, this is not a safe place for you to be at this time. Fear has an incredibly important role to play. However, back to your point, and just to bring it into work a little bit, if you're interviewing someone, there's this old school like mentality that an interview is almost like an interrogation where the lights come down, you ask all these questions. If you use that approach when you're interviewing someone and you interrogate someone, what you're going to get is someone that's good at answering interview questions. Rather than, if you feel someone feel really safe and really secure in an interview process, you're really going to find out who they are. And then you've got a much better chance of making an assessment on whether that person is right for you and vice versa. So although on its surface, it might sound like, oh, it's great to interrogate someone and blah, 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 do this in an interview. the best thing you can do is feel someone feel safe, drop the fear, then you'll find out exactly who they are and what they want to achieve in your organization. So I was just linking up a point around work there.
By the way, so many of people in human resources have a background in psychology. And what you're explaining is some of the basics of human psychology.
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, you still have these intensity questions or the pseudo judging questions. Tell me about your weaknesses and strength when you know that you're going to be screwed if you answer the reality. So people are expecting that you tell them a bullshit.
Yeah.
And this question hasn't changed much. I see it in some interviews.
Yeah. I'm too perfect. That's what people say, isn't it? They go, "Oh, I'm just a perfectionist. I just try and do things too well." That's what everyone goes to. It's just rubbish. It's absolute BS, isn't it?
There is also about happiness, because I think it would be nice to have this correct, not like nice sentence about what is happiness, but at least the elements of happiness. There is almost often this confusion about happiness with excitement or pleasure. So the pleasure when we get a nice tie that costed 300 or some shoes 300 or 500. I don't even know how much they cost nowadays, these beautiful shoes. And is that an element to consider in terms of happiness? Does it contribute really this pleasure, this dopamine that we get when we get an object or when we succeed about something that sometimes took a little bit of effort, something considered in happiness, or it should be completely disregarded? And how can we differentiate both pleasure and excitement versus real happiness?
So, by the way, I'm going to stand up for 2 seconds because I'm in a room that has lighting that goes off if you don't move, and because
that's good.
I'm like trying to get like
environmentally friendly. That's good.
Yeah. So, this is a really great point, and I think if we had all of mine and your children here, we would have a really geographically diverse group of children from across the world, knowing both of our backgrounds, right? So, but they're all human beings, wherever they're from. And the interesting thing about this, where we're going to go with this, is evolution doesn't happen over 1,000 years. It doesn't happen over 2,000 years. It happens over tens of thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So the things that make us happy, they haven't been invented in the last 100 years. They haven't been invented in the last 1,000 years. They haven't been invented in the last 2,000 years. And I can go back and back and back. In terms of this conversation, let's go back to ancient Greece for a second. So in ancient Greece, they would talk about a couple of different things in terms of happiness. They would have two phrases for happiness. They would have eudaimonia and they would have hedonism. In that phrase, it allows us to have a more nuanced conversation about what happiness is. Because most people think of happiness, they think of it as hedonism. And when we talk about hedonism, what we're talking about is the bit that you were pinpointing about a phrase that we talk about, which is the hedonistic treadmill. It's this treadmill that you run and you keep getting to these things and you think it's going to make you happy and it doesn't. And my wife just laughed and laughed and laughed at me the other day because I said something to her. I said, I've realized that all the things that I need to be happy, I've had for at least 20 years in my life. So I work really hard in my business. I try everything I can to be successful. But all the things I've always needed, I've always actually had. And I've had them always. But like everyone else, I'm out there chasing all these things and I love my work and I'm privileged of what I do and all these kinds of things. But eudaimonia is what we would now call subjective well-being. And it's our general underlying state of happiness. So hedonism is going to go up and down. It's going to be like, oh, you go to this party and you've got like this high, and then maybe the next day you feel on a low. Eudaimonia, which is what we really think about as subjective well-being, which is what we measure at work, is that underlying state of happiness. And that's what we're trying to impact, because if you look at all the research, people that are happier at work perform better, they're more creative, they're more accurate in their tasks. Businesses, it's shown in multiple studies, that have happier employees outperform financially their industry peers. So the body of evidence there that happy employees perform better is growing all the time. It needs more work, it needs more research, it needs more data, but it's a building body of evidence. There's even an organization that in America now called Irrational Capital. They actually use employee happiness as an investment signal, and they've been outperforming the S&P. So, but going back to your point, there is still this confusion between happiness and hedonism, and that's where it gets bucketed when it comes to work. But I think this is where health and happiness start to come together closely. And the analogy that I would use with someone is, if you were going to try and run a marathon, you need to be training for it. You need to prepare for it. And health and happiness at work are the same. They give you the fundamental underlying body and brain in shape to do your best at work. Whereas if you're not happy and you're not healthy, there is no way that you can reach your maximum potential in the world of work. And it's not just work, it could be sport. I know, since I gave up alcohol, that I am a better father than I was before. And I was never a huge drinker. I was a social drinker. But I gave up alcohol because I realized I was, with all my work stuff, the next day, even if I had 1 or 2 glasses of wine, I was more tired. And I realized that my kids are only going to be young for a short period of time. I don't want to be tired when I'm with my kids. So I just said, no, I'm giving that stuff up. And I know that my performance as a dad is better because I don't drink. But that I'm quite analytical in that. I took the data myself and measured that. But as you say, not everyone does that. But if you keep thinking about those two things, health and happiness, they're the underlying foundations of performance. You still need to do all the other stuff. Like, you need to be good at your job. You need to research. You need to practice, all of these things. But if the foundation of health and happiness is not there, all those other things that you want to layer on top, like training and skills and all this kind of stuff, it's on sand, it's on quicksand, and it can easily collapse. And that's, I think, I'll hand back to you, but I just wanted to set that foundation of what we mean when we're talking about happiness and it's linked to health.
So let me summarize what I understood. So from one side, you mentioned the element of connection that contributes to happiness. There is the element that of differentiation between the pleasure and sustainable happiness, which is more related to the experience itself. Like, we can be even happy working like idiots, 18 hours a day, because it's about us feeling that we are doing better, even though we also appreciate this element of spending time with family. What about this element of meaning, or like we are doing something for the good of the planet and all that stuff? Is that really contributing a lot, or depends?
So in our model at the Happiness Index, we define happiness as what your heart needs and engagement as what your brain needs. That's our storytelling mechanism, so people remember it, because it's easy to remember. Engagement is what your brain needs, happiness is what your heart needs. What we're actually talking about is happiness is what you feel and engagement is what you think. Now, one of the surprises for people when it comes to meaning and purpose, because we track meaning and purpose in over 190 different countries, because we track happiness, meaning and purpose, energetic connections, all of these things we track. Meaning and purpose is actually something your brain needs. And people, I think, in their brains bracket meaning and purpose and happiness together because they subconsciously think it's the fluffy stuff. And they put it together over here and they put it in that little part of the world that's all fluffy and nice. However, if you speak to our team and the people who've been involved in our work, your brain actually needs meaning and purpose because meaning and purpose is related to direction. And people seek meaning and purpose in different ways, and we should never judge. Some people seek it through religion, some people seek it through work, some people seek it through sport. You should never judge someone. Like I always remember a good example of a footballer that played for Arsenal and Tottenham, and he used to always negotiate the highest wage salary he could, and everyone said he was money driven. Doesn't care about meaning and purpose. If you scratch below the surface and you actually listen to his interviews, the reason he was money driven is because he was supporting communities in Africa that he was from. So on his surface, you can go, he just cares about money. But he knew that money was really useful to communities where he was from in Africa. So you should never judge someone where it comes from. But going back to your question is, meaning and purpose is actually something our brain needs. It's not something Gen Z invented. Like people talk about like youngsters, like they're aliens that arrived on a spaceship 2 weeks ago and they're turning up and asking for like ridiculous things. We all need direction. Expectations on what direction has changed. Like some people do want, they're very environmentally focused and that they want to know their company is environmentally focused. They're just trying to align. All that means is if you get the right people with the same values and meaning and purpose as you and your organization, you're going to go further. So it's a performance thing. It's a good thing. So that's just my point on meaning and purpose. Is incredibly important. From our perspective, there is a link to happiness, but it's more of a link to engagement.
Now, are we sometimes making it a little bit over the top, pushing this happiness responsibility to corporates? Because people may say that it is becoming an excuse for individuals not to take ownership about their own happiness. Employees, so that there might be certain amount of employees that maybe they are not made to I mean, everybody is made to be happy, but they are not really ready. They don't have this capacity at that specific moment to be happy, and it's not the responsibility of the company.
So let's make everyone feel a bit better here. You can't make your wife happy. You cannot. You cannot make your husband happy. You cannot make your children happy. You cannot make your mum happy. You cannot make your dad happy. You cannot make your friends happy. And you can go on and on and on. You cannot make someone else happy. Therefore, a company cannot make you happy. So that then comes back to the question is, why are we even talking about happiness at work then? Like, why is this conversation even happening? What we've been doing at the Happiness Index is understanding the underlying factors of what needs to be present for someone to be happy. So if you just look at the top 4 globally, psychological safety, does someone feel safe in your team? Safety in general as well is in there. Acknowledgement, aka do you actually acknowledge the fact that they've put a massive shift in? Freedom is in there, like freedom, autonomy, all those types of things, and relationships. So going back to the company's role in this, the company's role is to allow a culture where these factors are present. They still cannot make you happy. That is still a two-way street that you need to contribute to. So I think a company's role is like a farmer or a gardener, where their job is to prepare the soil. So their job is to know that individual plants grow in different ways, in different soils, and in different cultures. Then when they know what they want to grow, going back to the name of this podcast, once you know what you want to grow, you need to create the right environment for those plants, in this example, your employees, to grow. So the job of the leader is to make sure people feel safe, people are acknowledged, they have freedom in their role, that relationships are fostered. That's the role of the leadership. And then an outcome of that is happiness. But you cannot control the inputs. So companies should not be responsible for the outcome, but they can facilitate the inputs and make sure they're there. Just like the basics, like having water in the office, like doesn't mean you can't be responsible for people in your office being hydrated, but you can be responsible for making sure that the water is there that they can drink. And so no, a company is not wholly responsible for making you happy. They can't make you happy anyway, but the great companies are the ones that are providing it, because going back to the name of your podcast, you're not going to get growth without it unless you work on that environment in the same way that if you were a farmer, your plants are not going to grow unless you get that great environment in place. You're not doing your job right as a farmer, a gardener, or a CEO if you're not tending and looking after what's in the ecosystem.
Many senior people in corporations, because I have got certain discussions with them, believe that what you're saying, connection, recognition, autonomy, these are feel-good intentions that somebody who is half hippie invented. Many of them do not haven't heard about the fact that it is embedded in our biology. There is certain chemicals in our brain that are produced when we feel in this trusted environment. And I use trust because I love this guy, Paul Zacco, whatever he was his name, when he talks about this molecule oxytocin and the fact that you can measure it in the blood and you can see across different cultures around the world, blah, blah, the impact of these elements that you have mentioned. It is sad. It is bloody sad because it looks really like in the US, they will call it this person, this woke person. I think
woke is the phrase.
Yeah, everybody's woke if you don't have certain, if you think good about other people. So and this is sad. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that despite the fact that companies have been collecting data, maybe not about happiness directly, but they have culture surveys. I still remember back in my corporate days that there was this famous pulse survey done every 6 months. And when they have the data, they don't know what the hell to do with that. The actions that they produce are meaningless. And sometimes employees feel even worse. They feel betrayed because it's almost like a political game of throwing a party so that we forget that we feel not recognized in the workplace. And with a party, probably they believe that as children, we will forget about it. Is there actually a way that they collect whatever data, even the happiness index, and that they really know what to do? Because sometimes these surveys, they stop at the way I give you the data. This is what is happening. But then it's up to the corporations to decide what to do. How do we take good decisions out of this data, Matt?
And let's pick, just start with that word woke. Like, if you look at the actual definition of it, awareness of racial prejudice and discrimination, like there is no downside to being aware of that. What has happened is, and this is where we should park politics and just move it here for a second, is it has become a phrase for anything that is seen as liberal. And people just use it and it's weaponized and and that is where certain things in the workplace get labeled as that. But if we forget the politics for a second, it is the responsibility of anyone that's got an idea to justify why it's a good idea. Happiness is exactly the same. And that is what we do on a day-to-day basis with our customers. We connect how people feel to the financial statement of the organization. We're known for our reports and our research, but our actual consultancy work we do is connecting those two bits, because if you use two very emotional words, which is ignorance and incompetence. Now, if you do not know about this research, you are simply, or this whole body of information that we're talking about, You're simply ignorant to the information, okay? Which you can forgive someone for that because they may have been raised and trained to be a CEO in a particular way. Like a phrase that I heard someone say the other day, a CEO, oh, we need to keep people on their toes. Like that's just that does not make sense. That's the opposite to what you should be doing. And even like there was some research out the other day about this kind of like this weird thing that if you make a load of people redundant, it makes the people that stay perform better because they're on their toes and they're worried about being redundant. I think that's been shown to just be absolute BS. So you've got all this kind of like what people think is a leader versus what actually data and science is showing is a leader. And so if you're not aware or you've not been trained on it, that's just ignorance. That happens in all walks of life and all different types of things. The challenge becomes when people do know and they're not implementing it, because you have to, at a certain point, ask yourselves, is this a version of incompetence? Because if the data and the research is showing that companies that create all of these environmental things that we talked about to create happier employees perform better, at what point have you got to say, well, you know what, this CEO has no emotional intelligence and is tone deaf to the needs of their human beings. Are they the right person to be running the business? Could their skill set be utilized better in different areas of the organization? Maybe they're not a CEO, and maybe we need to redraw the lines of what a CEO should be, because I think in a modern world with AI, a CEO has 3 roles, which is vision, culture, values. Everything else out of that can be picked up by other people in the organization. But vision, values, and culture, they have to be core to what the CEO is doing. But that is a very different skill set to, for example, someone, maybe they were CFO and they became CEO because they knew the numbers well. I mean, you think about people who can't read a P&L. I've spent the last 17 years running my own businesses, had to learn how to run a CEO, a P&L. Maths is not my strongest field, but you can put your P&L into an AI now and interrogate it. So, by the way, I'm doing the standing up thing again to get the.
Don't worry. Let's do some gymnastics.
There we go. So, I think there's an education piece on all of this. Is my summary.
Now, if I didn't have enough clarity. No, I have to be sincere. So when you develop a report, the work of consulting that you are doing, it's not only giving them the data, but it's also telling them the type of actions that they should be doing.
Yeah. So anyone can go to thehappinessindex.com now and they can go to try it and they can send out our survey and get the data back. And that data, you can do it up to 250 employees for free. That data will visualize your culture for you. And there is a bit in the platform that is giving you advice on correlation of like where you should starting to work towards causation. But to get into a causal conversation, there's deep work that's required to do, because every company is different. So that's where we move into like a consultancy part of the business. But most companies in the world, they're engaging on the free version of the Happiness Index because the data we collect from there goes into our global benchmark. So that's valuable for them. They get to use the tool for free. It's valuable for us because we're feeding our global benchmark. So there's a really great like exchange of service there. And then we have a growing arm of this consultancy business, but it's still an early part of what we're doing, and it's the sort of thing we've been practicing and perfecting over the last couple of years, but will grow over the next few years.
Matt, I want to pick your brain on something. So let's imagine that there is an employee, just a person, a human being, feeling a little bit meh, what could be the most practical way so that this person starts working on their own happiness? I mean, we believe that we are working on our own happiness by having goals in our lives, but we're following just what society or somebody told us that we should reach in order to be happy. So what could be the initial steps for this person who has decided, I'm going to take an action?
Yeah. Okay, so if someone's deeply serious, I'd recommend going to Yale University for free. So if you Google this, anyone that's listening, Google the science of well-being by Yale University, you'll be able to find it on the Coursera app. It's a course that you can take that will, and you get a qualification. You can get a qualification at the end of it, and it will take you through the basics of some of the most of the subjects that we've been discussing today. Things like Eudaimonia, what drives you for happiness, and so on. You can take that and get a foundation. Going back to the ignorance thing, it doesn't matter whether you're a CEO or you're just starting out, or you're 65 years old and you've been doing a job that you don't like, and you know what, you want to learn something different. Anyone can go and take that course and learn the basics here. And that's a very engaged way of doing it. A less engaged way would be to start to do what you talked about right at the beginning, which is actually start to think about it and talk about it. Actually write down. Just write down. I'll give you an example of something that happened to me when my children were born. I volunteered to work in a charity shop for a day to help out. It was this competition thing around, someone paid for me to go and work in this charity shop for a day, basically. It was a really nice competition prize that had been given out. And there was a woman in there who was retired, and she didn't know who I was or what you do. And she said she had no idea that I had any involvement in the happiness index. And she said to me, it was like this mystical woman appearing out of nowhere. She said, Matt, when are you at your most happiest? And because I researched this, I was thinking in my head, she's asking me about flow, because there's some great, if you're interested in this subject, go and look into flow as well. Like, when is someone in flow? And I said to her, when I play football, that's when I'm most in flow. It's when I'm the least stressed. And she said, oh, when was the last time you played football? And I said, oh, I don't play football anymore. She said, why don't you play football anymore? I said, oh, I've got children. I haven't got time. And at this point, she went from being a mystical person into being a mother. She just assumed me as her son at that point, and she started to lecture at me. And she said, no, this is not how parenthood works. She said, children come into your life, you don't go into their life. And it was a really beautiful moment, and we had a really great conversation afterwards. It turned out that her career, she was like the head of the university in Madrid, and she happened to be living in London, and she was an exceptional character. And but I never forgot that conversation. So, but the reason I'm sharing that with you is, even though I work in the research, I can forget it myself. So if I'd have done the activity of writing it down, like, playing football actually makes me a better CEO, which sounds crazy, but I need that. I need that for my own well-being. But I'd given that up. And actually, I'm a better dad for it as well. So I'd given it up for my children, but I now play twice a week, and I coach at least twice a week. So it's come full circle. But I think, write those things down. I've met a lot of people in the HR industry recently who they've started to take up things that they did as children again. And there was a HR professional who came to one of our last brunches. She said in her career she'd lost all her energy a few years back. She had no energy for anything. She didn't describe it as burnout. She didn't describe it as depression. She did not describe it as unhappiness. She said she just felt meh, as you said, all the time. And what she had done in her own journey is she'd started teaching people how to dance at the weekends. But she loved dance as a child, and she'd stopped dancing for years, but now she teaches dance. And she said that unlocked energy in her that flowed back into the rest of her life. So there's, to answer your question, if you really, really want to get into this stuff, go and take that free course on Coursera and tell people that you went to Yale University, because that will be true. Secondly, if you're not that committed, just write it down and then ask yourself, when was the last time you did that thing?
I love your comment about flow, and because it's highly correlated to the joy of that we get by doing something that we just do it for the hell of it. Just because it makes us feel good, even if we are bad at it, or your country is not good at it. Sorry, you, Matt. Matt, I guess that if I had to ask you, because I was planning to ask you about the same questions, how to start for a corporation, would it be the good first step for a corporation who wants to take care of the happiness of their employees? But you used the right word. It's not about, you cannot give them happiness. You can make it, prepare the ground floor so that it unleashes the happiness. But they have to do some effort.
Exactly.
The initial step, would it be to assess it, or the initial step is to talk to other people to understand what is happening?
Yeah, I think you should be doing both. Like, if you want a technological solution that doesn't cost any money, like, go to the happinessindex.com, send out that survey for free, and you'll know where you roughly are against our global benchmark. So you'll know, like, where do you kind of sit on that. It's a starting point, but you don't have to you don't have to send our survey out. Get out there and speak to people, but don't speak to one or two people, and don't speak to just senior people, just junior people. You've got to get like a broad spectrum. The challenge is you need both, because if you're very senior in your organization, no matter how many people you tell that you're a chilled out CEO and you're open door, there is a power dynamic that exists that you pay their wage or responsible for their wage being paid. So even if you're the most chilled out CEO in the world, not everyone's going to tell you everything's in their mind. So the anonymity of a wider survey, I think ultimately you've got to do both, because when people speak to you face to face, you can feel it, you can feel their emotion, but you need both bits. So what I would do is I'd send the survey out, and then I'd go out and speak to people about the results. I'd go, let's say psychological safety came out low, I'd sit people down and say, look, seeing these results, do you agree with them? How do we fix it? What do you think? Why do you think people are feeling like this? And use it as a conversation starter.
Matt, thank you very much. I'm going to be putting this link to the survey. I'm going also, you remind me about this Yale course. It was the lady, Lori Santos, right?
Lori Santos.
Yes, I remember, because I took it 7 years ago. I remember because it was just the transition between corporate to
perfect. It's perfect.
To be broke entrepreneur.
It is, yeah. It's the perfect entry point for anyone.
Exactly. Matt, thank you very much for your time and for the magnificent mission that you have put in your life. And it's wonderful to know people like you in this world.
Thank you for inviting me on. And I just love the conversation of growth, because companies cannot grow without their employees growing. They're not separate things. Simple as that.
Thank you, Matt. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.